The headline reads, China urges U.S. to correct export curbs on Huawei chips. Hi, and welcome back to Ruben Tech, where we have been dissecting day by day, piece by piece, the AI chip war between China and the U.S. Just yesterday, Beijing announced its reaction to the Washington ban on the Huawei Ascend series. Let's go ahead and read the article. The Chinese Commerce Ministry urged the U.S. on Monday to reverse its export restriction on chips from China, particularly those produced by Huawei, the Global Times reported. The U.S. is abusing export controls by tightening restrictions on Chinese chips based on groundless accusations. I want you to keep that groundless accusations in mind. We will visit that in just a moment, the ministry said. The remarks came in response to an announcement last Tuesday by the U.S. Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security, otherwise known as the BIS, that said the use of Huawei's Ascend AI chips anywhere in the world, including China, violates U.S. export regulations. The ministry said the move seriously undermined a recent consensus reached between the U.S. and China during talks in Geneva and urged Washington to correct its mistakes. The U.S. actions severely undermine the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese firms, threatens the stability of global semiconductor supply chains, and hinders global innovation, it added. The ministry warned that if the U.S. continued to harm China's interests, China will take resolute measures to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. Last week, Chinese Commerce Ministry spokesperson Hing Yanquan slammed the U.S. announcement regarding Huawei's Ascend AI chips, calling it a typical non-market and unilateral bullying practice that exposes the U.S. protectionist and unilateralist stance. Okay, let's just jump into this in case you don't know real quick. The Bureau of Industry and Security, you can find it at bis.gov. It's an office of the Congressional and Public Affairs. Last week, very sloppily, I might add, I'm not just saying that because of who's in the current administration, but because it's a fact, very sloppily, they live edited and updated this website right before our eyes, like you would a Word document with your friends. What do I mean by that? Like typically with the website, especially an important announcement like this, you would have it planned out, what you planned on saying on the website, along with all the documents. You would produce it, you would test it, and then you would release it live to the people. That wasn't the case with this. They did a back and forth editing it, and we could see all the edits on the site as there was multiple versions released. So again, they treated this very trivial, very sloppily. But what they did here is they announced a recension of the Biden-era artificial intelligence diffusion rule, but they strengthened chip-related export controls. And the main thing down here is the guidance that they issued, alerting the industry to the risk of using PRC advanced computing ICs, including very specific Huawei Ascend chips. Now they say specific, but they did leave open the door to adding any other chips that they wanted. Now I've covered this multiple times on this channel. I'm not going to cover it again, but I want to bring up what the Chinese had mentioned about unfounded claims based on groundless. The term used by the ministry was groundless. Now, I want to point out why they might have said that, because in this guidance on the application of General Prohibition 10, GP10, right, where they banned the use of Huawei Ascend chips, they mentioned that these chips were likely developed or produced in violation of U.S. export controls. They don't say that they were. They don't have evidence saying they have concrete evidence proving that they are. They say they were likely developed. And then down here, they say that the chips were likely are subject to the EAR and may have been produced in violation of the EAR, subjecting them to GP10 restrictions. Then furthermore, they say such chips likely are either designed with certain U.S. software technology or produced with semiconductor manufacturing equipment. So again, the term likely. And then down here, they also say the design or production of the PRC 3A090 IC likely involved one or more violations of the EAR. So I wanted to point this out because what's going on here is that I do believe at a bare minimum, the United States should provide concrete evidence, not likely, that these chips are in violation of export controls, because the guidance that they're offering here threatens to the entire world, including Chinese citizens of any country. It threatens them with substantial criminal and civil penalties. And I do feel like if you're going to go that far to threaten civil and criminal, substantial criminal penalties, and I'm not making that up, that's right up here in the paper. Engaging in GP10 activities, including use, just the use. It does not say they have to be hooked up to US servers. A lot of people are like, oh, it has to be hooked up to US servers. No. It does not say it has to be used in AI. They have separate sections about the use of AI. It does not say anything. It's not limited by anything. It just says the use. Okay? And that's what the Chinese ministry, what they're objecting about right there, is how broad that term is. Use of such PRC 38090 ICs without BIS authorization. So that means you have to contact, you're in Australia, you have to contact the US government. You're in China, you have to contact the US government. You're in Russia, you have to contact the US government. You're in Ukraine, you're in UK, you're in Peru, you're in wherever. You have to contact the US government and get BIS authorization. However, I will note that the only authorization they will give you, because they say in here, the only thing you will ever be authorized to do is to test these chips for performance. You cannot run them for work. It would just be a performance teardown, right? And then to deconstruct them. That's it. That's the only two legitimate uses of them. So without BIS authorization could result in, not my words, theirs, substantial criminal and administrative penalties. So again, if you're going to threaten the entire world with this, one, I think that this document should have been created a little bit more professionally. Come down here, look how trivial it is. Huawei Ascent, ASCENT. They're threatening substantial criminal and administrative penalties, and they can't even spell the name right of it. And you might say, Ruben, I spelled things wrong. Well, you're probably not threatening people with substantial criminal penalties either, are you? This is the official US government document. This isn't the word up here that got missed. This is on its own line. It's very obvious. It means that nobody literally even proofread this. Okay? That's the disdain that they treat us with. That's how unprofessional they are when they release these documents. Have somebody proofread it and make sure that they have their spell check on. Okay? So anywhere in the world you use these chips, you can be penalized. I do believe personally that the term likely used in here is just, if you're going to be threatening these type of things, criminal and civil penalties, you should be able to prove that they were. And that shouldn't be very difficult. All they would have to do is, even though Huawei would probably never ship the US government directly, right, one of their CM3A4s, the US still could get it through backdoor channels. And then all they would have to do is get one of these chips, examine it with TSMC or with NVIDIA, and they could easily prove whether it was, based off of TSMC or NVIDIA's technology. At a minimum, I feel that they should do that first. So what could China do back to the US? This is the thing. We just heard, those of us who are extremely happy, we heard that, the US had a good meeting with China at the Geneva and Switzerland. And then we got to get into this, and this is threatening the truce and the trade agreement, which is what we don't want. I don't think anybody wants this. China doesn't want this. The US doesn't want it. Well, one thing that China could do is that they dominate the rare earth market. So we know that China produces over 60% of rare earth materials. This is just what they mine. This does not include the supply chain that they have set up, which is bar none the best in the world. And so if they're controlling 60% of this, and these are what are used to make the silicone and more for these high-end chips, If they were to turn off this spigot, that would mean the rest of the world is competing for that 40%. And what's that going to do? Whoosh, it's going to drive prices way up. It's not something that you want to happen. Okay, and now I'm not saying China will do this. I hope it doesn't come to this. I really am hoping that the Trump administration, they want to wheel and deal, and this is just like them trying to have leverage, and that they're going to go to China and they're going to make a deal. I'm still holding out a lot of hope for that. But another thing of leverage that we've heard about in the news is the fact that so many foreign countries hold so much U.S. debt. This right here is the 10-year yield. And we see that it's at rates, they would never want this above 4.5. Scott Basin, who has spent the last 10 years of his life working to get this as low as possible, though he'll never admit it, this has to be extremely frustrating to him. This is a guy who, before he joined the clown show, was the ultimate professional. I'd like to say whether you liked him or not, but he wasn't the kind of guy you would like or not. He was in the finance sector. You probably never heard of him. But the simple fact is that nobody would have looked at him and said he wasn't a professional. He was. But now he's on the clown show. But I imagine that secretly this has got to be bugging him a lot because he worked on this for quite a while. He was a person that wrote about the United States deficit. We're at 1.22% of GDP. We're moving towards unsustainable levels. We're paying out almost $1 trillion in interest. And do you know how we pay that interest? We issue more bonds. So when all the 10-year bonds we have out there, when they come due, the government has to reissue new debt to pay those. Okay? And then guess how the government's paying the interest that it pays out on those? By issuing new debt. Yes, I'm not kidding. The U.S. government cannot afford to pay the interest on its debt. So this is not a perfect analogy because the government is not like your household. But just so you can basically understand, imagine that in your household, you had a credit card and you could not afford to pay it off. Okay, and imagine that you took out another credit card just to pay the interest, not to pay the base amount, the principal, just to pay the interest. You take out another credit card, and that credit card is at a higher rate. Okay, you're going to be in, eventually you're going to enter into what's known as a death spiral, where it's going to get out of control. And that's where we are with this, because you might look at this and be like, well, this isn't moving, that much. This is a tremendous amount. When they're talking basis points here, even something as small as 5 basis points, which is just like 0.05%, is a tremendous amount. You're talking on what is $36 trillion. Is it 36? It's around there. A substantial trillions of dollars of debt. So if you have $10 trillion, right? Just 1% of that is 100 billion more you have to pay in interest. And you can see how this is raised from where it was basically at zero. Now it's up to here. And so if we can go back a little further, we can see that these 10 years, they're coming due, right? And these 10 years, we're at 1.9 to 2.2 in the month of January. And now Basin's going to have to refinance them at 4.4, possibly 4.5%. And so now Japan, the UK, China, a lot of these countries hold a lot of U.S. treasuries. Now understand, they don't want to just sell them off. They don't want to have a huge sell-off because this is assets that they hold, and so they would hurt themselves. But they definitely can apply pressure to the bond market through steadily selling altogether. Now, China, I don't know that they would do this any more than they already have. They've already been divesting from the dollar. Ever since Trump won his first administration and Biden entered into essentially this trade war with China with the first round of sanctions, Biden increasing those sanctions, then Biden putting 100% tariffs on the Chinese EVs. China realized that the U.S. wasn't going to be wasn't going to play fair anymore. So slowly they've been divesting from the dollar, selling it for quite some time now. And buying what? What have they been buying? Because a lot of people say the dollar is a safe haven for the world. Where are you going to put your money? Well, they've been buying gold. Lots and lots of gold. In fact, I believe February was one of the largest records for Chinese history of buying gold. So they've been putting their money into gold, and they've been selling dollars. And understand that the U.S. enjoys great strength off being the world's reserve currency. So when we use it as a weapon to target other people, it's going to scare people from the dollar. And that's not necessarily, I don't think that's a good thing to our long-term interest. But what do I know? You can let me know what you think down below in the comments. If you agree with me or if you disagree with me, leave a comment down below. And be sure to like and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed already, I need you to hit that subscribe button. Okay, everyone? Have a great day. Thank you.